Hi everybody, this is Harold from ClearHorizon Miniatures, and today I'll be showing how I painted a 15mm scale HADES Ghost Team Operative. And this is going to be the sniper. These are available now. It's $8.99 for 9 figures. Each one has 3 separate heads and an optional backpack. So what it showed off there is the figure was first primed black on the base, and I used the Citadel layer Baneblade Brown as the base coat. At this point I use that foundation paint to dry brush on the figure, on the base here, to bring out the texture of the sand. And you want to make sure you wipe off most of the paint of the figure, paint off the brush so that it doesn't come out streaky. It's more like a dusty thing. And I do apologize, sometimes it's a little out of focus. I was trying to get the camera to focus on the figure there. All of these sequences are about 150% speed, sped up a little bit, otherwise it'd take a little bit long. And here you can see I'm using some Army Painter matte black. This is what I usually do, is put it on a tile there. The brushes I use are Tamiya Modeling Brush Pro. This is the number 1, which I'll be using the entire time. I do have smaller ones. I find the paint on this is nice, and it does hold quite a bit of paint, which is nice. So what I'm doing now is just going back over the figure where some of the paint from the base actually came up there. Nice thing about painting figures is that if you make a mistake, you simply go back over it, which I'll be doing a couple times on this. This is going to be a pretty straightforward painting. I'll be using gray and black to pick out the exoskeleton, some washes here, and basically it's a little awkward because of the camera placement, so I'll try to get it in focus as much as possible. If you see in the back there, my 2.5-year-old daughter was actually painting with me, so that's, I don't have a third hand grown out anywhere. That's actually her painting right there. And what I'm also doing is occasionally I will clean off the brush, make sure that there's not too much water on it, just to make sure that it's not drying out or anything. I know some people will use wet palettes, which does kind of the same thing, but I've used the tile for so long it's much easier for me. You can see I do place the figure on top of an old paint pot with some blue tack. Makes it holding a little bit easier, and I do move the figure around quite a bit because you want to get to all those angles. If you hold it just in one place or keep it sat down, it's not going to work very well for you. This is the base color I like to use, Charadon Granite. Unfortunately, you can't get it anywhere anymore, so I'm always on the lookout for it. It is one of my favorite colors, though. It's like a greenish, brownish gray. And you can see I put a little bit there. I put a little bit of water in there. I'll make sure to make not too much water. And the first thing I'm going to be doing is actually going over the entire figure. Don't have to be too neat, although I don't want to get on the base, obviously. And then I will be painting the gun black, so any that I avoid on there is just less painting I have to do later on. But a little bit of water helps it flow smoothly. The foundation paint covers nicely, and especially the gray seems to cover very nice. So I want to make sure I get all the cracks, especially down there. You can see, like, in between the edges there. I don't want black showing through. So once I go through all of this, I will be letting it dry for a little bit. But this is actually all done within an hour or two. So these paint up fairly quickly. Of course, you can take as long as you'd like, but these come out to a very decent game standard. Also, if you didn't want to use these specific colors, these are the same technique I basically use for all my painting. You know, once you get the base coat down, you do a wash, especially for 15mm. The wash, the Army Painter Strong Tone, it does an excellent job of going in all the crevices and provide a natural shadowing effect. So here you can see the I've gone black. I'm going back with the black to make sure that I cover all the spots that I missed before. I place a little bit on the tile. You really don't need a whole lot, so these paint pots will last quite a while. And using the edge and making sure when you take the paint off the tile that you kind of twirl is the best description for it. Twirl the end of the brush. It kind of keeps it a nice point. The brush will sometimes, the shape, you're going to have to be aware of it, because if it's flat or pointing in a different direction, you're going to want to use that to make sure you get the points where you need to. The only thing you also need to be aware of, especially with this figure and figures that have, like this sniper rifle here, it's a long pointy bit, the tin alloy, the cast-in is pretty malleable, so you just kind of bend it back into position, make sure you don't do it too much. You can always replace it with a brass rod, although I've never had to do that. Here I am just going over the exoskeleton parts, kind of almost like a reverse highlight. Normally you do the raised parts in a lighter color, but I wanted to have the exoskeleton stand out by using black instead. I've put a little bit of water in this paint, not a whole bunch, and just enough to help it flow a little bit. Otherwise it dries up a little too quick here in Southern California, and it can be a little warm. So what I do is just put a little bit of water so it doesn't dry up before it reaches the brush. Another reason I like the slightly larger instead of the like 000 size, which I will occasionally use, but I prefer using this number 1. Same in Winsor Newton Series 7 brushes, which I used to use, although I've transitioned over to the Tamiya Pro brush. I like the handle a little bit better. I find the points stay a little bit nicer, and it's actually, I find it a little nicer brush, although it's a little hard to get a hold of. If you see the paint on my hands, that pink and purple, I haven't particularly been using. My daughter was painting her first miniature, and those were the colors she chose, and then decided to get the paint everywhere else. So what I'm doing also is the helmet has some optics, a little bit like Sam Fisher and Splinter Cell. So what I'm doing first is just covering the area with black. Actually, I made a mistake that I'll go back later on in the video and I correct. But what I'll be doing, here you can see the black on there. So first thing what I'll be doing, I'll get to the optics in a second. The strong tone, this is kind of the secret weapon. I used to use something called Devlin Mud from Games Workshop. This is a replacement that's actually a little bit better. I put a little bit of water in it. That helps break the surface tension. And I simply paint it over the entire miniature. Sometimes you will have what pools up in corners, and I had that kind of in the front area, but I do want to make sure it's nice and covered, even though it looks like you're doing something crazy to your miniature. But believe me, once it dries, it'll provide nice shading and kind of tie everything together. You can see right in that right arm there. See what I do in a second. I will dry off my brush and then put it right there and let the brush soak up the excess. And that way it won't be too pooled, or won't cover any details, and it'll look nice when it's dry. Usually this takes about 20-30 minutes just to dry, since this is a fairly wet paint. So you can see there I've painted it, I've let it dry. Now I'm going to use a foundation white. This is going to be the first step for the optics. And because of where the camera was, a little hard for me to see, so I went back and corrected it. But basically the technique's the same. I put a little bit of water, a little bit of paint, and you really need to be make sure your point is nice and crisp. Sorry, it's a little bit out of camera here, but effectively all I'm doing is dotting it. I'm not dragging it across. It's just like you would do with a pen, and I'm just dotting the little indents for the optics, so that when I place the light green color, you can kind of see there I did it on the scope, and the little optics for the helmet. When I place the light green color, it will provide a nice bright background for the light green, and it will make it stand out even more. And that's just a little bit of black paint. Now of course I am cleaning my brush in between these colors, and I'm just kind of making sure the optic on the front of the sniper rifle is clean and circular, so I'm not getting anything out of whack there. That's the green color I have. There are some fluorescent colors that would probably work a little bit better, but I didn't have that on hand, unfortunately. But this one works pretty good. And you can see twirling it there to really get a nice fine point, because I don't want that green going everywhere. And the white will actually make it stand out a little bit more. I actually had to go back and fix this because I put a dot in the wrong place, but it's the same technique. And especially once everything's kind of highlighted up, it provides a nice bit of color, especially because this figure is going to be mostly grays and blacks, although the base is a nice light tan color. So again, sorry it's out of frame. It's a little hard. I use a lighted magnifying lamp, which I find, especially with 15, makes it much easier to kind of see where I'm putting everything. Not required, but it has a circular light around the magnifying glass that really makes it easy to see the figure, and provides a nice light in case of taking pictures, things like that. So I just went back over some foundation color, the Chardonnay Granite, the same thing I did the foundation gray with, and what I've done here is simply go with the same color and kind of hit all the flat parts because of the I apologize for being a little out of focus there. The Army Painter Strong Tone kind of flattens and darkens the colors just a bit, so I don't touch the recesses, but all the edges and most of the flat parts I will hit again with the base color. And you could easily use this in a game. I tend to go at least 1 or 2 more steps. Here's the Chardonnay Granite. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but here's the Ash Gray. I combine the two. You can see right here. I'll put little dots next to each other, and then what I'll do is use a little bit of water in the middle and kind of ease them into each other, and go back and forth until I find the color I like. And I'll go back and forth either 1 or 2 times depending on how light I want the highlights to be. See, I want it a little darker, a little more like the base color, a little bit of water, mix it right in the middle there. I like this way. I'm sure there's better ways to do it, but this is the way I like doing it. I can see the lightest color, I can see the darkest color, and I can see where I'm at in the middle, and that makes it easy. Now I'm just going over even a smaller area of the flat portions, and what that does is provide even a nicer highlight. Doesn't need to be particularly clean. I like it a little bit, I don't know if random is the right word, but not real sharp edges to it. That helps it blend in, I think. I will, for vehicles, use sharp edges to really highlight the panel lines, and sometimes with armor and things like that. Although if I wasn't painting the exoskeleton in black, I probably would have done the same thing, but I wanted to keep that muted color because these are supposed to be covert assassin operatives. You can see there I added a little bit of light gray to it. I am going over the sniper rifle. I will go back over the sniper rifle. I wasn't able to get as clean of a line as I wanted. I simply, there I am bending the barrel back in shape just because it got a little out of whack. And we'll go back over that sniper rifle with black to just kind of clean up those edges a little bit. You can see I added just a little bit of light gray there, a little bit of water to make sure that it's still flowing nicely, and just hit some of those armors. And it's a little hard to see, but the torso armor, I'm kind of just adding little lines to make it a little bit more defined, show off all those really cool details. Same with the armor plates and the legs, and then the hands, and around the forearms too, where you have the flat surfaces to kind of wherever light would be, and wherever it might fade a little bit or catch the light there. Trousers, arms, and tip of the foot there. And of course, the face is generally a focal point, so I add a little bit more hard edge highlight just to show off the shapes there. And that's basically the figure. You can see the other one I've done. They match pretty well. And besides that, after this, I'll simply put on the grass tufts. Sil4 is what I use, and they have an adhesive already. You simply stick them on, and you end up with a figure like this. And thank you for watching.